Welcome to our weekly 3-minute therapy podcast. I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist, and I'm here with my co-host, Mick Berry, who will take over the introduction.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Michael.
You're
So
welcome.
we present different scenarios regarding rational emotive behavioral therapy, or REBT for short. REBT was formulated in the 1950s by Dr. Albert Ellis after he had spent several years involved with Freudian psychoanalysis and concluded how ineffective it was. So that is Freudian psychoanalysis being ineffective. So he began to come up with his own approach to treat clients, in which he recognized that it's not the experiences that we have that upset us, but it's our ways of viewing them that upset us. This is upsetting us emotionally. Physical adverse experiences are definitely physically harmful, but once we are out of physical harm or danger, then our emotional reaction to it depends entirely upon how we view it. And Albert Ellis recognized that people have a tendency to make demands upon themselves, other people, or the world in general. And he observed and found through his own experience and in treating several people that if people change their demands to retaining the desire, then they would no longer be mentally disturbed. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Okay, very good, very good. And today we are fortunate to have as our guest Niraj Nanal coming to us from India. Is that right, Niraj?
Yes.
And Niraj, do you want to tell the viewers about what you'd like to discuss?
Yeah. Actually, I want to discuss about the philosophical aspect of REBT because REBT did have a lot of influence on me, even though I now conclude that there are some limitations of REBT which I experienced through my journey. But barring that, REBT still is a very philosophical system apart from the therapeutic value it provides. And one of the aspect of its philosophical outlook is regarding relating with other people. And I read somewhere, I want Michael you to throw more light on that. That one part where Albert Ellis quoted that keep your self-interest first and others as close second. That was his argument, and he gave several reasoning for that. And I just wanted to know, Michael, your perspective about how where this sentence came from and what was his logic behind that. If you can help us understand more about what does he exactly mean by that.
Well, as far as where it came from, the first time I heard that perspective was from Albert Ellis, so I don't know what the antecedents to that were. Do you know, Mick?
Well, what are we talking about? Self-interest and having still consideration for other people?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ellis's view of putting yourself first and others who are important to you a close second.
No, I don't know where he would have gotten that from, but I think he probably just devised it because it's not too hard to just think of that in terms of a good way to live.
Yeah. And I think when people don't live their life that way, they often have musts, which is, I must do well and get approval. So that's the paramount interest to me, rather than it would be preferable for me to do well and get approval, but that also involves treating others well uh, as well. So I think that's, as Mick is saying, that's part of the philosophy that he presents.
Okay. So any more comments on this philosophical angle which he presented? Any other thoughts you would like to put forward?
Yeah, Mick?
Well, REBT advocates and strongly encourages unconditional self acceptance. And a lot of people have said, well, geez, if you just unconditionally accept yourself, you can go around doing anything you want and still accept yourself, even though you're wreaking havoc on the world. But unconditional self acceptance is a third of the equation. Unconditional other acceptance is another third of the equation, and unconditional acceptance of the world is the final third of the equation. So if you unconditionally accept yourself and you unconditionally accept other people, that includes accepting that other people have desires in addition to your desires, and things often need to be worked out between the two of you or the 10 of you or however many there may be. So unconditional self-acceptance and unconditional other acceptance lead us to be very interested in our own well-being, but also in the well-being of other people.
Yeah. Another way to put this is a popular phrase, which is live and let live. So live your life as best you can and let others live their lives in any way they can, as long as they don't forcibly impinge on you. Did you have other questions about that, Niraj?
Yes. So I am trying to present this philosophy in a different way because, particularly in societies like India, not everybody, but in general, there is a notion that you should always think of others first. So when Albert Ellis presented this statement, it may be controversial to certain societies. Okay. So in that context, I have seen many examples where because people hold this philosophy that you should always look at others' interest first, they unnecessarily suffer many times. So I can understand that there is a must involved in this. But when it comes to practical situation, like living in a family or living with friends or living in a corporate environment, how to apply this philosophy of keeping your self interest first and others as close second? Can you take some examples? I can also add some examples, but can you start with couple of examples to make us understand that how to apply this philosophy in close relationships?
Yeah, an example would be living in a family, as you said. Mick, did you want to
Yeah.
add to that?
Well, I was going to say in several settings, your own priorities might be best to be considered second. In other words, if I'm working for a company and the company needs something and I would rather have something else, it's in my best interest to put the company's priorities ahead of mine if I'm going to keep my job.
Yeah, but so as you're saying, Mick, the first priority is you putting your interest first, keeping the job, and in order to keep the job, then you put the company's interest second. Is that right?
Yeah, however, it would easily, I think, be said that, well, yeah, I want to keep the job, but the company's priorities come ahead of mine outside of if I'm going to keep the job, okay, that's established, then other priorities can come ahead of mine.
Yeah. Okay, I think that we're sort of saying the same thing there. Does that put it more in context for you, Niraj?
Yes, yes, but I'm more keen to understand because the solution which you are providing is more or less what is in my mind also, and what you are talking about is a CBA, cost benefit analysis. So at the end of the day, you apply cost benefit analysis to several situations in close relationships, and then take a call. So is that what you mean at the end of the day?
I think that's as good a way to describe it as anything. Yeah, I do think it can be very complicated and it's not always cut and dry. Sometimes it takes a lot of mulling it over and trying to figure it out, especially in family situations and interpersonal relationships, to,
Mhm.
can have conflicting desires, and working it out can often be quite difficult.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that is very complicated in the family. For example, it depends to some extent on the ages of the children in the family. At an early age, it's better for the parents to put their interest first because they know better in most cases than the kids. But when the children get to a certain age and can think for themselves, reason for themselves, have more life experiences, then it might be better for the parents to bow to the kids and let the kids take put their interest first. Mick?
Yeah, and I was going to say I teach a lot of kids, and since I'm the teacher, generally it's my guidance that takes the top priority. However, I can sometimes teach kids as young as 6 years old, and sometimes they know what's better for them than I do. One quick thing is that I don't know whether they're right or left-handed. They can tell me whether they're right or left. I'm a drummer, and so I teach them to play right or left-handed, and I give them a pen and I say, sign your name. The kid is going to indicate whether they would like to be taught right or left-handed. I can't tell. They're going to let me know. So this is a case where the child's interest comes ahead of mine. I'm going to need to defer to the kid in that instance.
Yeah, I have a question, Niraj, about how this works in Indian society as you described it. So if what you're saying, you put other people's interests first. So if two people in Indian society are applying for a job, uh, one person would be more in line with Indian society by saying to the other person, well, you take the job because I want to put your interests first. And that could come up in a lot of different situations where people have conflicting interests and you put the other person's interests first.
Yeah. So I think I will just change the setting of that example which you gave. So particularly in cases where in a marriage, let's say a husband is getting a job and wife is also getting a job. More often than not, the wife may hold back and she may allow the husband to join a job because probably both of them working together, both of them working is not possible practically. So probably a wife will take a back seat. So in that context, she will always look at husband's interest first and take her interest as secondary.
Yeah, I can see that in a family, but in other contexts, I don't understand how it.
Other contexts, it may not be it may not be relevant, but particularly in the family setting where there are certain values which are imposed, like a woman should take care of her husband, or she should put her husband first and herself as second. So in that context, these examples will work out where if both are getting a job, there will be situations where a wife will take a back seat just because the husband is has to be a first priority.
Yeah, Mick?
Well, I was going to say also, one thing I've experienced with Indian culture, because I teach a wide array of people, I was invited to the house of an Indian family to have dinner, and I was quite surprised that they didn't eat. They waited on me and they served me, and they didn't eat while I was there. And I was informed by another parent of a student who was in India, said, oh yeah, this can be a custom in India when sometimes you're invited to somebody's house and they don't eat, they simply serve you. I
Yeah.
let them do it. But
Yeah, so I think Mick, you classically you gave a classic example, and that's in this particular situation. If Michael, you can put forward, is it just because they are saying that is it that their self-interest to treat their guest well, therefore they don't mind eating after their guest has dinner. So
Yeah,
how do
yeah, I
you?
agree with that. That's a good way to put it, Niraj.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And also, I was going to say, I mean, this would be a case where you put somebody else's interest ahead of you. You could be hungry, but I'm going to serve this person to show how generous I am to him or her. I do agree with you, Niraj, that I do think there is a demand there. If I'm saying I always must put others' interests ahead of mine, or if I'm saying I always must put my interests ahead of somebody else. Sometimes it's beneficial to put somebody else's interests ahead of me, or sometimes it's beneficial to put my interests ahead of somebody else. Watch out for the demand.
Yeah.
Yes, but often it is not as black and white, because subconsciously, even though they want to eat first, the value system is subconsciously driving them to allow you to eat first, or first treat you and then they eat afterwards. So it's not more about they keeping the self interest, their self interest, as you should they should treat their guest well, but it is more of a value system that comes into picture. Now,
Yes.
how do you answer that?
Yeah, so they're maintaining the custom without
Yeah,
evaluating the benefits or the cost of it. Sure, and
yeah.
that often happens. Culturally, people do things out of habit or tradition, and sometimes the usefulness of the particular behavior is no longer there, but it's still adhered to.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it's in their interest to act in ways they feel is good or acting well. And people in Indian culture apparently feel they're acting well if they put their guests first. So, in that sense, you could say it's in their own self-interest to feel good about their actions uh, by adhering to the cultural values.
But don't you think the in such cases that there is no awareness, or there is a sense of delusion, because they are not questioning those customs, those values?
I
So
think
how do
there,
you?
I think there definitely could be a lack of awareness by adherence and demanding that things must be a certain way. I think, yeah, definitely. If you're demanding something, well, Michael, what do you think about this? When you're making a demand, I would say there's a lack of an awareness that there could be another way.
Uh, Well, I think that usually a demand comes from a desire or a preference. So uh, they might be aware of another way. They have conflicting preferences and they decide that they have to act in according to the values of the society. So that's a possibility. But as we were saying earlier, it's kind of complicated and we don't know exactly what people are thinking, Mick.
Well, I would say though, if somebody is making a demand, they at least have minimal awareness that there could be another way. They're adhering to a certain way, and they may, if questioned, as we do in REBT, challenge somebody's demands, then they would own up to it. But often they're overlooking it when they're making a demand.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think
Neeraj?
as we are discussing, I think I'm more or less coming to a conclusion that this philosophy of Albert Ellis will be most aptly used for submissive people, because I have seen submissive people cannot question these values, cannot question these customs, because they have a demand that I need the approval of the society, or I need the approval of the other person. So I think if he or she can imbibe this value which Albert Ellis propagated, and I think he gave actually he gave a lot of reasoning for that, because in one instance where he says that why this philosophy is important, because if you are not happy with yourself, how can you take care of others? So in that context also, he said that why it is important to keep your self-interest first and others as close second. So in this particular comment, how, Michael, you can respond? What's your
Yeah,
take on
so
that?
if that's what Albert Ellis said, I would disagree. You can be very unhappy with yourself. You can be depressed, anxious, and still uh, care about other people and put them first. Yeah, Mick?
Well, and I've often seen this. There is a play by Tennessee Williams in which a mother is trying to get her daughter married to somebody and she's making a bargain with her son and she says, I don't say me, you don't need to worry about me because I'm old and don't matter. But she was caring about her daughter. It's very possible to care about other people and do things for other people, even if you're not caring about yourself. I'd say ideally you want to care about other people and yourself, but it's possible to care about other people and neglect yourself.
Yeah, Niraj.
Yeah. So here what we are talking about is if they are doing it genuinely, then it's not an issue. But I am talking about cases where they get, after doing something for others just because of compulsion, they blame themselves, they suffer because in the first place they are doing something for others because they are not assertive enough. So I am talking particularly of the submissive kind of people who are doing it not from genuinely or honestly, because as you mentioned about the mother, there would be cases where a person genuinely wants to do something for others, and even though in the process he or she has to suffer, that is okay with that person. But here I am talking about a category of people who are submissive, who actually don't want to do those things, but just because of the social pressure they are doing it. And after that, basically it's a issue of non-assertiveness. So they are not assertive enough to tell to other person or society, but from inside they suffer. So I hope I made myself clear about this particular
Well, I
case.
think they're suffering because they have musts on themselves. I must go along with society's values, and if I don't, I'm a bad person. Whereas that doesn't mean denying or objecting to society's values, but it means at least having a preference. I prefer to go along with society's values, but I also prefer to put my self-interest first, and that doesn't make me a bad person if I do. So then they have a choice between preferences.
Correct. So there are two ways to address this issue, as I can understand. One is obviously eradicating the demands, removing the demands. Okay. And the other thing is the philosophical persuasion which Albert Ellis tried to do through this sentence, that keep your self-interest first and others as close second. Now, just now you said that I don't agree with, if Albert Ellis would have said like this, that how can you be happy if you are not happy with self, how can you be happy with others? So I want to ask you this question, that when he made this statement, what is the logic or reasoning behind this statement? Why this statement just is justifiable? That keep your self-interest first and others as close record. If I ask a question, what is the logic behind this statement?
The
Uh,
logic, well, he says the logic behind the statement is if you don't put yourself first, others are not going to put you first. They're going to put themselves first, and then that'll deprive you of a much better life. Mick?
well, I was going to say, I'm not sure that that it might even be the best advice. Put yourself first and others a close second. I think it might be better to think of have your put yourself as first as much as is a good idea and put others first as much as is a good idea and figure it out and see what's best. I think that's a little more thorough. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I think that's very good.
Yeah, so both of you don't agree fully with the Albert Ellis statement, that keep your self-interest first and others as close second.
Well, I think
Okay.
I would disagree with that if you say to yourself, always be this way, if you make a demand out of it.
Yeah, yeah,
That isn't
yeah.
always the best way to be. Sometimes put others first and yourself second. If it's somebody's birthday party and I've got to prepare to give them a birthday party. I can't practice piano now. I need to make arrangements for their birthday party. I'm putting them ahead of me.
Yeah, so therefore Albert Ellis precisely said, keep others' interest as close second.
Yeah,
Close, he used.
Yeah, others who are important to you in your life.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We just have another couple of minutes. So, Mick, did you have any final words about this?
Just that, Albert Ellis had lots of brilliant ideas, but I think he'd be the first to say that doesn't mean they can't be improved upon.
Yeah.
The way I improve upon REBT is simply by coming up with my own devices for implementing it that Albert Ellis hadn't devised, one of which I've shared with you, Michael, which I call a 3-minute monologue, in which if I can't get to a piece of paper to do an ABC, I just start talking out loud to myself while I'm driving a car with rational thoughts. Albert Ellis didn't teach me that. I came up with it on my own.
Yeah, yeah, very good. Niraj, did you have any last words?
No, I think it was wonderful to discuss. I could understand different layers of this philosophy and the pros and cons. So I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, great. And if someone wants to get in touch with you, how could they do that?
Yeah, so I have a website www.neerajnanal.com.
Ah, great. And you are a financial advisor, is that it?
Yes, yes. So I'm a certified financial planner, a CFP.
Yeah.
Could you spell your website, Niraj?
Yeah, it's NIRAJ NIRAJNANAL.com.
Okay.
Okay.
Raj Nanal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Great, great. Okay, well, thank you very much. I found this a very interesting discussion, a little off what we usually discuss, but certainly relevant to people's lives. And thanks, Mick, for your great participation. And I'm Dr. Michael Edelstein, clinical psychologist. My website is 3minutetherapy.com. And I'm an author. One of the books I wrote is called 3-Minute Therapy. Thanks, Chris Rossini, our tech engineer. And if you would like to volunteer to be on our on our podcast, please let us know. We'd be happy to have another guest. This was very interesting. And comment below if you have thoughts, questions. Give us a thumbs up and a like if you enjoyed this. Suggest subjects for future podcasts, and subscribe to the 3-Minute Therapy podcast to do what, Mick?
To stay on the rational side of life, yourself, and others.
And that'll be in your self-interest.